Hello everyone, welcome to episode 8 of Can Chats. My name is Eric Mojica, your host for the show. So today our guest is Michael Adriano. He is a powerlifter located here in Kansas City, Missouri, and he earned his Bachelor's Degree in Kinesiology from Avila in 2017. And Mike doesn't like to talk about it too much, but one of his best lifts is a deadlift, and he has hit 700 pounds at his latest meet. So congrats for that for Mike. In this episode, we discuss powerlifting and some of the experiences that Mike has had through the entire process of training. Mike likes to use a lot of scientific principles of strength conditioning in his programs, and so some of the things that go with that is progressive overload, volume, intensity, and just more importantly is just tracking all the numbers of every exercise that he does. So the three main lifts that come with powerlifting is squatting, deadlifting, and bench press, all done with a barbell. And he likes to track other things like all the assistant exercises because it gives him a better understanding of what volume and intensity he's applying and how he can make adjustments leading up to a meet, or for whenever he sets up his own personal goals to hit a certain number in either of the three main exercises. And so a bulk of this conversation, we talk about other elements that come from training. So just all the recovery aspects and dealing with injuries and just being mentally strong when it comes to having setbacks with training. Because it's the nature of it. It's a sport, the same way that you can have an injury playing football or soccer or baseball. There's a lot that goes into it with weightlifting. And so some great things that I got out of this interview with Mike was just talking about how he sees training and what he values from it. Even though he's competed in powerlifting meets here in Kansas City, he doesn't really identify himself as a powerlifter by competitive nature. What he really appreciates is just competing within himself and setting goals and hitting those PRs and seeing the progress and the growth that comes from all the training programs. So if you are somebody getting into powerlifting, I hope you get a lot out of this show. Can just know a little bit more about Mike's background and what he's done with powerlifting. And last but not least, if you're a fan of the show, make sure to give us a follow on our media outlets. The show's available on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, my handle is @TheRealMojica. There, I'm always sharing tons of stuff from other trainers and other people doing research out there. So you can find a lot of good content just checking out the Twitter page and all the things that I love to share there. And so nonetheless, here's episode 8 with Michael Adriano. This episode of Can Chats begins right now. All right, so we got our guest today, Michael Adriano. He is a powerlifter, and welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, man. It's good
awesome.
seeing you again.
Good to see you too, man.
Yeah.
So me and Michael, we did our undergrad here together at Avila, and it's been, what, maybe 2 years?
Yeah, May of 2017.
Yeah, so it's been a while. So Michael's been doing a lot of powerlifting, and so kind of want to just start it off, talk about how you got into powerlifting and just tell your story.
Yeah, so I'm 24 years old. I got into powerlifting when I was 21. I was training at a Gold's Gym in Lee Summit, Missouri, and I linked up with a guy who had about 8 to 9 years of powerlifting experience. And I had just been doing like just traditional bodybuilding stuff at that time. And I'm like, you know what? This is a little subjective. I wanted something a little more measurable, something that I could track my progress numerically. In powerlifting, you could see yourself getting stronger because your numbers are going up. With the training that I was doing, it was just solely physique based. So I got into that, like I said, around 21, but I really started taking it seriously when I was 20, last year, when I was 23. That's when I started really paying attention to my training. That's when I graduated. So when I learned all that information, I was like, well, now I can apply this information and I can better train myself, better train others. And that's really where it kind of launched off from there. I've done 3 meets so far. The way that powerlifting works is you have the 3 lifts: barbell back squat, barbell bench press, and then barbell deadlift. You get 3 attempts at each, 3 max attempts, and whichever lift you complete successfully out of those 3 lifts goes towards a bulk total of those 3 lifts. So the most recent meet I did was 14,488 pounds at 198 weight class. Still not considered elite, but we're getting there. So
it's a process, man.
right.
Right on. So you talked about what you've done. So now, what does powerlifting mean to you?
Powerlifting to me, to be completely honest, I tell people it literally could have been like painting. It's something that I could see progress in. And I had been an athlete my whole life, a ball sport athlete, played soccer, tried to play football, baseball, basketball. So for me, I'd done the team sport element. So athletics has always been in my background, but I'm like, well, powerlifting is it's just solely on you. So you fail and succeed based off the amount of effort that you put in. There really is no coach per se. You may have someone who runs your training program, but you go into the gym each day, you do the lifts, you put in the effort. So for me, I'm not necessarily all in on the sport of powerlifting. I just see powerlifting as a way for someone who loves to just lift and train, a way to get their numbers solidified in front of judges, in front of stipulations as far as squat depth, pausing a bench press, basically just solidifying their numbers that they do in the gym and just getting them on paper, and they can see that progress.
Right on. And so how do you get into competitions?
Competitions, local competitions, you can basically just sign up for. The gym that I work at, Olympic Gym, Kansas City, we do competitions twice a year, one in the spring, one in the winter. You basically just choose a weight class. I advise people to not cut weight for their first meet. Just go in with, pick a weight class that you kind of weigh around. If you maybe have to miss a meal the night before to make weight, that's fine. Or if you're weighing, 210 and there's a 220 weight class, we'll just do 220. Don't cut the 198. You basically just sign up for you'll pay a registration fee and you'll need a singlet, and that's really it. They have a couple different classes. You have raw, which is you can wear knee sleeves, neoprene knee sleeves, wrist wraps, and a belt. You have classic raw, which you can wear knee wraps, which is probably what people more commonly see, as well as wrist wraps and a belt. But that's just the gear that you can use, but you don't have to use anything. But every federation will require you to wear a singlet. So it could just be a wrestling singlet. What's considered raw is a very thin material, nothing that gives you any assistance against your body. So nothing that gives you a whole bunch of spring like a squat suit or a deadlift suit. So.
Okay, awesome. And so let's just go straight into training, man, because I know that's what you love.
Yeah.
So what's the starting point? What's the starting point for getting into a powerlifting meet? What does week one look like? How do you go about that?
So the way I structure training for me is, if you're familiar with Juggernaut training systems, the way they have more of like a linear periodization type style. So I'll always start out with an accumulation block, intensification block, and then realization block. So you accumulate the volume. So I'll be doing sets of 10 and I'll leave maybe 2 reps in reserve the first week. The second week, 1 rep in reserve. Third week, it's an all-out set of 10 for say 3 to 4 sets. So I'm building that fatigue on purpose because for that 4th week, I'm gonna take a deload. So the way I used to train was I would maybe go 9 or 10 weeks without a deload, which is basically just cutting your volume in half. Cutting the volume in half is a lot better than cutting the intensity. Volume is a main driver of fatigue. You can, squat, deadlift, bench 90% a few times a week and not get a whole lot of fatigue. The muscle soreness, everything, that really comes from the bulkier volume. So the way that I'll structure the training is the first month will be sets of 10, the second month will be an 8s phase, and we slowly work up the intensity as far as weight, and then the reps slowly drop off. So, 16 weeks out from a meet, I'll just be in the 10s phase, 8s phase, that's still the accumulation block, we're accumulating fatigue volume, and then move down to sets of 5 and 3. The intensity gets higher, volume gets a little bit lower, And then leading up to the meet, maybe a month out from the meet, now that's when I'm hitting heavy singles, more sport specific. So the goal for powerlifting, when you're 12, 14, 16 weeks out, you don't have to do barbell back squat or barbell bench press. You can maybe utilize specialty bars, you know, work in some leg presses, do some assistance exercises, but those will just help you build that volume. But when you get closer to your meet, that's when you really need to go through your cues, utilize the bars that you're going to use in competition, and utilize your competition stance. That, to me, it becomes more important the closer you get to a meet. When you're 4 or 5 weeks out, that's when you really need to dial in and get specific for what you're going to do on meet day.
And do you also track all the other assistance exercises?
Yeah, so everything's tracked. To me, if you're not tracking it, you might as well just not do it. So assistance exercises need to be weak point driven in a lift. So let's say on a squat, your hips rise way before your shoulders do. So you're almost doing like a good morning type squat. There, I would really utilize front squats, something that would force someone to maintain an upright position, keep their hips underneath them. So that would be an assistance exercise that you could use, honestly, for about 8 to 10 weeks. I would probably cut that out. I would cut out any and all assistance exercises about 4 weeks out, 5 weeks out. But that's just specifically for me. Your accessories are basically based upon your specific weak points. So my bench press is very weak for my weight class. So I can play around with my accessories, whereas bench specialists can probably just bench. That's really all they need to do. Just barbell bench, yeah. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, I am more of a deadlift specialist, so I can really I don't have to do a ton of volume for my deadlift. I can handle high intensity, so I can just execute that same technique over and over and be fine. So for me, you don't need to go crazy with them. Your accessories are just simply to supplement and bring up your weak points around your main lift.
So I assume that, for competition, the strategy really comes into play to understanding, what are your weakest points and how can you develop that. And so what's your thought process in terms of how you kind of program that throughout the weeks leading up to competition?
We'll say about 4 weeks out, that's when you'll hit about 94, 96% of your 1 rep max, or of your projected 1 rep max, your training max. The goal for the meet is to be as rested as possible. So for those 2 to 3 weeks, you're lowering fatigue. And about 1 week out, I take completely off. So powerlifting is very nervous system driven. You can be a small guy, but you can be very strong. It's because you're very efficient with the muscle that you have. It's not always the biggest guy. So it's the guy that's least tired on that day and rested the most. So for me, dating back to a meet I did in December, I rested a full week before. And on meet day, I was very rested. The plan is that with those 3 attempts, your first attempt is something that it's a confidence builder. It's something that you can hit. It should be something that you can hit for a comfortable set of 3. Your second attempt would be a little bit more challenging, something that you could, squeak out maybe 2 reps with. And then your third attempt, if you're feeling good that day, that's when you're in that personal record zone. That is when you kind of throw caution to the wind and just kind of go for it within reason. So for me, you don't necessarily have to hit the number in training to hit it on the platform. It does help to build confidence and give you an idea of what you could do at the meet, but really the rest that you give yourself that week of the meet, your body basically super compensates from all that fatigue, and you essentially can do something that you might not be able to do otherwise, because you're basically training always in a fatigue state. So even in those latter weeks, where your frequency might be low, your intensity is high, but your body's still fatigued from the subsequent 12 weeks of training, 14 weeks of training. Mm-hmm. So for me, lowering fatigue is the biggest thing. That will secure you a good meet day as far as picking your attempt selections wisely. Mm-hmm. Don't be outlandish with your attempt selections. First attempt should always be something that you know you can hit, mm-hmm. and then you can kind of judge based off those first attempts from there.
Awesome. And so, how do you track fatigue for yourself? Do you track like your sleeping patterns or any devices that you use or anything like that? Or
I don't use anything like that. I really sleep is it's very elusive for me, so yeah. I really don't sleep a whole lot. Part of it's my fault. Part of it is caffeine intake and just work schedule. But
that's the battle within, right?
Right. Yeah. It's one of those things where you can't just out eat, poor sleep. Yes, obviously calories are required for. Enough calories are required for muscle repair and just feeling good, having good energy levels, but sleep is always number one. But really, when you're doing spine-loaded movements like squats, when you're pushing yourself to the max with compound movements, regardless if you're doing a lot of volume or not, it's still taxing on the body. So just the simple fact of not doing that for a week, you could maybe not get the most sleep for that week leading up to a meet, but you will still be far more recovered than if you would have continued to really do much of anything that week. So, but on a daily basis, I don't really do a whole lot to track. I've been utilizing at our gym. We have the Hypervolt. It's one of those self-myofascial like jigsaws, basically. Mm-hmm. So that kind of negates rolling out for me because it kind of does it for you. So, yeah. But I've been utilizing that a lot, and that's really helped. Just regular stretching, dynamic warm-ups, things like that. Just not being lazy. Mm-hmm. So.
Gotcha. So you kind of touched on nutrition. So when it comes to weight classes, how do you go about your nutrition? Let's start out with maybe trying to cut for a meet. So what is that process like? Where do you start?
I would say when the volume's higher in those first couple months of a cycle, my carbs will be a lot higher because I will need those for the amount of sets and reps that I'm doing. So my carbohydrate intake will be a lot higher, fat intake will be a little bit lower. And then as I get closer to a meet, the carbs seem to become less and less important. And then I increase my fat intake. Protein intake will almost always remain the same. Carbohydrates do spare protein, so I still try to hit at least a gram of protein per pound of body weight. But for instance, very first meet I did, I cut about 15 pounds of straight water weight, which was not smart. Yeah. I didn't diet at all, so it was definitely a learning situation for me. So this meet, I tried to stay around 205, 206 throughout the entire training cycle. It was a little tough to build strength, but basically that last few weeks, I did go keto for about 2 weeks, and then I increased my carbohydrates just a little bit. The thing that I had learned, I'd actually watched another podcast, and a guy was talking about athletes who deplete themselves with water dehydration, as far as like saunas or hot baths, and they're going keto. Yes, they're going to lose some weight, but they're going to take a bigger hit because their muscles are already depleted of carbohydrates and water. Whereas you could keep those carbohydrates and water in, and when you deplete yourself by sweating out, you won't take as big of a fatigue hit because your body isn't as depleted starting out as it would be if you weren't taking in carbohydrates. So the last week, I ate about 300-400 grams carbohydrates every day, and just had to cut maybe 2 pounds of water. So there's ways that you can go about it. I always say try to stay within 5 pounds of your weight class if you compete fairly frequently. I don't have any plans to compete for the next year or so, so we won't say what my body weight is right now, but you know.
Bulking, man.
Right. So it's not a huge thing to me. Performance is first and foremost, so that is where trying to keep your water and carbohydrate intake up would be huge going into a meet. Like I said, unless you have shots at some, you know, state, national, world records, there's really no point to cut any weight. Just go in being your strongest. So.
Right on. And so supplementation. So do you use a lot of supplements to, you know, to kind of start that process for you when the time is right, or you just straight up dehydrate yourself, or how'd you go about all that?
So this meet here, about 6 weeks out, I started implementing ephedrine. So I think it was about 75 to 100 milligrams of ephedrine a day. So ephedrine is a super stimulant, essentially. So that really picks up your metabolic rate, which kind of hindered my cardio a little bit. I was taking a supplement called Bronchaid. It's basically an asthma medication. So it has bronchodilators in it too. So it does increase your lung capacity, but for me, sets of 8 almost died. Like my cardio was basically cut in half. But food-wise, I could really afford to eat a little bit more and not take as big of a hit. But I was dropping weight at almost a pound a week without purposefully dieting. So that was a way for me to continue to keep my energy levels up and still drop a little bit of weight there towards the end. Still currently using it as a way to eat more without having those huge adverse effects of being in a calorie surplus. So that's really the only thing. I don't really manipulate salt at all. Water, I may, you know, instead of doing 100 grams of carbs during my training, I may just use 50 or 25 depending on what I'm doing. But typically during my training sessions, I like to put in essential amino acids and carbohydrates. There's a lot of research showing that helps spare your spare muscle tissue, so you don't have to utilize your own body's amino acids when you're training for, you know, 2 or 3 hours. So that's really it.
Yeah, right on. So we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be right back.
This episode of Can Chats is brought to you by All Star Chiropractic. Dr. Casey Berry is a chiropractor located in South Kansas City, providing adjustments with a holistic approach to promote self-healing through the power of chiropractic. The power that made the body heals the body. For more information, visit www.allstarchiropractickc.com or call the office at 816-942-6066. That's 816-942-6066. All Star Chiropractic.
All right, and we're back. So, Michael, I wanted to get into talking about just setbacks. So, first of all, from a competitive standpoint, what's that like for a powerlifter in general?
Definitely things that keep you out of the gym. When it's something that you love to do, as with anything, it's definitely mentally debilitating a little bit, especially when it's brought on by yourself. So for me, I've had some nagging strains that are just solely based off me not stretching enough, not doing enough to warm up. And over time, those things really add up. Once you get under heavy weight, your body's just not ready for it because you've not taken the steps necessary to prevent that. So it is brought on by yourself sometimes, but other times it's you happen to tear a pec, or you happen to tear a quad, or like I know, Eric, you've had some issues with your back. So me personally, I've in 2009 I had a stress fracture in my L5 vertebra, and if you would have asked me, 7 years later, would you go on to, ever deadlift heavy? Like I would have, you're crazy. Like that's why I even care about deadlifts. I'm a soccer player, but it's one of those things where if it's in the back of your head, let's say you have a strain, it's definitely your training is gonna change a little bit. Your intensity, your mental intensity is not gonna be there. So you really have to set your pride aside, set your ego aside, and just say, hey, I'm gonna stretch, I'm gonna roll out, I'm gonna get deep tissue massages. Because at the end of the day, if it's something that you really want to do and you want to progress in, you're gonna have to take those steps necessary to do those things. Like for me, it's the mental aspect for me is for competition, it is 100% effort. It is 100% weight on your back. It's not an easy ride. It's just lifting, but it is a little scary. It's scary squatting heavy. It's scary having heavy weight in your hands. Deadlifting, something could go wrong. You could lose tightness, and you could herniate a disc at any second. It's one of those things where it's thrilling, but it's challenging mentally. Competition isn't for everybody. I think training is for everyone. I think everyone should get in the gym. I think they should train, but powerlifting, the way it is, I don't necessarily think it is for everyone, and some people realize that once they do it. They won't know it. Yeah, they won't know it until they do it. But for me, I just realized, and it's not even being hardcore. It's not. It's nothing like that. It's just, if you can handle it, you'll know it mentally. If not, then you'll know it.
So how did your training age kind of evolve with all that? Because I think that for most of us who get into training, when we start off, we know what we know and we get after it. But then over time, sometimes like kind of commented right there the hard way, like you get into your training and then it just happens. And so how did that kind of evolve through your education and through your entire training programs?
I think for me, you have to realize, I don't always give myself enough credit, but you have to realize that when you have potential in something that you want to do, and when you realize that potential, you have to then do the things that will get you to your potential the safest and most efficient way. So when I started realizing like, hey, I could maybe do something with this, or I could maybe go somewhere with this sport per se, well, I'm going to stretch more. I'm going to make sure that I can actually do this for the next 10, 15 years, instead of basically throwing my body by the wayside and crapping out after 2-3 years. As far as like training age, I will say I've been in the gym since I was 16, 17, and everything gets you towards the point that I am now. All that, the mindless stuff I did when I was 17, 18, didn't know what I was doing, it still gave me a baseline for what I'm doing now. So, but as far as I like to count the serious training in a sense of like 3 to 4 years of what I've actually like incorporated scientific training principles, tracked progressive overload. Since I've started doing that, I feel like that's when I really like launched myself into the next into the next stratosphere, I guess.
I think that's the beauty of powerlifting, whether you compete or you only compete against yourself, is that just the nature of you wanting to get better at that specific thing, that you are so focused, so driven to take care of every detail. And so I can relate a lot of that to probably any general athlete, any sport, how, if you want to get better at, if it's kicking stronger, if you're playing soccer, or throwing harder as a baseball player, like you become that much more dedicated, that much more driven to it. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. If you train, you kind of understand that better. So
it's one of those things where, kind of reflecting on what I said earlier, everyone can compete. It then comes down to, can everyone be elite? Or maybe does everyone want to be elite? That is when the mindset of I want to be elite, or I see the potential in me to be elite, that is when they take the steps necessary to become elite. That's why not everyone's millionaires, not everyone's an NFL player. Some people have the talent, but maybe they just don't want that for themselves, or they're not willing to take every single step necessary. It's not as bad that you don't. it's just with lifting, to me, it is just lifting. It's not that serious. No one's forcing you to do it. It's your choice to do it. You choose to put your body through that pain.
No one feels sorry that you're sore.
Yeah, no one feels sorry that you're sore. You literally do it to yourself. No one's, literally, at the end of the day, no one's forcing you to do this. There isn't a whole lot of money in it. So it's one of those things where if it's fun for you, then do it. And if you see that you're around people that maybe you can compete with, and maybe they're really good or maybe they're not, you know, you can learn from them, and then you can, you know, make a name for yourself in whatever it is that you do. But for me, it's, you know, I have a full-time job. You know, at the end of the day, I know powerlifting's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna support my financial life. So it's just a fun thing for me to do. It's just it gives me a purpose and a sense of tracking progress, and it's just, I guess it's a hobby per se. So for me, it's not emotional. You probably wouldn't even know I'm in the gym unless you happen to see me lifting. It's solely work for me. It's just something I love to do. I don't yell, I don't holler. I hit a huge deadlift PR this past meet, and it's almost just, you know, I don't even know if I smiled. Like, it's just very like,
all right.
Yeah, for me, it's just on the next thing. Not that I don't appreciate it, not that it doesn't make me happy. It's just I hit that goal. You know, it was cool to do it in my home gym, so it was. You know, I think it was very cool for everyone else to see, but it's just on to the next thing for me. So
yeah. Awesome. It's all about just the experience, right?
Yeah, it's
just training.
Yeah, setting up a plan and just executing that plan. That's the prior meets I had a coach, and he definitely taught me a lot. He, you know, I commend him for that. But going through school, paying the amount of money I did to go to school, I was like, you know what, let's maybe try this on our own and you know, just see what I can do. And so I wrote my own training cycle for this previous meet. I called my own attempts at the meet, and pounds-wise did twice as well as I did my previous meet. Could have just been a good meet, or maybe I actually set up a good plan for that meet, because I was there every training session. You know, coach wasn't there every training session, so you know yourself the best, but sometimes you just need someone who maybe has more experience to just maybe guide you. But I will say that just do it for yourself, and once you learn enough, then you should be able to, you know, always take advice from people, but you should be able to do it on your own one day.
And so mental aspect of training. So we all have them, man, like days where you just don't want to train.
Yeah.
Days that you're just not feeling it. So what's your process for that? What's your mindset like? You know, what are your strategies to kind of just keep on pushing forward?
I guess for me, kind of going back to no one's forcing you to do this. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it.
Don't do it.
But again, if you are serious about it, whatever your choices will always reflect how serious you are about something. I've never just skipped a session in the gym based off how I feel, regardless of how tired I am. What I have done is half-ass a session before. I have done that. Left halfway through it, and you know, but I've always at least made it to the gym. The thing that, and I think this goes back with training age, comes maturity. So when I realized, like, if this is important to me, then regardless of how I feel, I at least need to do something, if it is that important to me. If it's not, then I'll continue to do what I used to do. So now I may just lower the intensity, maybe cut the volume a little bit, and kind of take that day as an L and just say, hey, you know, I need to get more sleep, or just man up and, you know, say, hey, this is what you chose to do, so just do it. Unless you're physically like at risk for injury, then there really is no excuse to just sell yourself short and not put in 100% effort. if you're feeling like, mentally, if you're feeling so fatigued that you're going to risk injury and you just never deviate from the plan, you always stick to your plan, then I would say let's maybe, use some kind of auto-regulation and try to adapt to that and just try to, change something. Just get in and do something, whether it's half of what you were supposed to do. If you're supposed to do 3 sets of 5, maybe do 3 sets of 2, or maybe just do 1 set of 5 and then lower the weight and do a few more sets of 5. Just something that can keep your confidence up. I definitely don't always feel like training. I love training, but sometimes, if you have a long work day or something like that, maybe some personal life issues, you don't always, want to get into the gym. So I would just remember the end goal, remember your why you're doing something, why it's important to you, and usually that gets people, fired up again. Mm-hmm. At least that's what I've seen with myself. This is the only life you have to do this. So mm-hmm. if it's important to you, then you'll at least find a way to get to the gym. So
yeah, and I think that the why, I think that's huge, because I know you got experience training people, and I'm doing personal training as well, and reminding people of their why. I think that's like the best advice you can ever give to a novice trainer. So,
yeah.
A novice trainee, somebody training. And so I agree, man. Just remember your why. Remember your why and what your goal is, whether if it's losing weight, if it's competing for a powerlifting meet and whatnot. I think that's,
And your why can change too. It can, it can maybe be superficial at first, and then maybe it becomes a deeper thing. Like, let's say my goal is weight loss. And maybe it's superficial in the beginning of, well, maybe I just want to look better. But, why do I want to look better? Why do I not want to just be healthy and look better? Maybe it then transitions into, if you have kids, well, maybe I want to stick around for my kids more. That's a pretty big why. Mm-hmm. I've had clients that at first it was superficial, and then it became deeper as they kept losing weight. It became important to them to not ever look like that again, and not ever be in that situation of poor health again. So I think sometimes it's okay for the why to change. If you don't have a why, you're never going to go anywhere.
You're just kind of bouncing.
And that's with anything. Like, why are you at your job? Why are you doing that job? Why, if you're in a relationship, why are you with that person? Can you grow with this person? So to me, life is just about growth, finding ways to grow, and just, remembering why I'm doing anything. That's waking up and because I definitely have days where I just go through the motions. I've done that for years. Just wake up, I'll just do, well, that's just what I do, so I'm doing it, I don't know why I'm doing it. So I've really had to sit back and ask myself, well, why am I doing this? What is the end goal? What's in it for me? So
yeah, training, man, there's so many life lessons that can come out of it as well. That's awesome, man. So just some final thoughts. So where can people contact you? Where can they find you? Any Instagram, social media stuff?
Yeah, Instagram is probably the best way. It is MA_power_. Shoot me any message about training, as far as questions, training questions. That's definitely the best place. Never check my email, so don't email me. The Facebook, nothing. So definitely Instagram. That's where I'm most active.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking about powerlifting, and I'll be in touch with you, man.
All right.
Right on. Yeah.
And that concludes our interview with Michael Adriano. If you're into powerlifting or looking to get into the sport, you can contact Mike at MA_power_ on Instagram. Like I said in the beginning of the podcast, Mike is very passionate about powerlifting and truly enjoys talking to others interested. So feel free to reach out and ask about anything with powerlifting. Questions on training, programs, anything with weightlifting and working towards your fitness goals. After our podcast recording, Mike and I talked for about an hour and caught up with some other things relating to life and lifting. What I found fascinating about Mike is how he looks at training and doesn't take it too seriously, meaning that he values his time at the gym rather than being so narrow focused on the outcomes of his progress.
I think that there's a fine line between training with a purpose and training for an identity. Not that there's anything wrong with working out for aesthetic reasons, but training should ultimately be a positive experience where you can grow both physically and mentally. I've read up on some stories with post-competition depression, and it comes most often from powerlifting and physique competitors who create a strong identity with their training. From what I've been exposed to as a trainer involved in the fitness community is that this phenomenon happens when we focus on training goals from an outcomes base rather than a process based. Training and dieting should be a part of our lives to improve our health and fitness, something that I see as a natural challenge when you're an athlete and competitor. At the end of the day, I think that we should always remember our why. Like Mike said, our why and purpose can change for why we train, and that's the beauty of evolving through the process of training. Some of us like to train because we value how we look in the mirror. Some of us train because the gym is a great place to relieve all our stress and anxiety from our daily lives. And some of us simply just train because it gives us something to strive for. Whatever that reason is, we have to maintain a positive relationship with exercise and use that activity to maximize our health and improve our daily living. Thank you for listening to the show, and make sure to check out our website at knchatspodcast.wordpress.com. You can find all interviews in video and audio format there, linked from YouTube, SoundCloud, and the Apple Podcasts app. Give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram, and make sure to share this podcast with your friends, teammates, coaches, and anyone who enjoys learning from health and fitness professionals. We have more guests on the way to the podcast, so stay tuned. This is Eric Mojica signing off. Until next time, this is KN Chats.